Chapter 7. Clara. Clara kept an eye on Mason during practice. He didn't appear to be favoring the ankle, but she also knew he was a master of disguising injuries. She had seen it firsthand in high school when he'd strained his shoulder and played anyway because a scout was coming. Thankfully, he'd been able to catch with the other hand, and he hadn't done further damage to his shoulder. But this ankle injury was a whole other matter. If it truly was Achilles tendonitis like she suspected, continuing to play on it could lead to a rupture. "You watch any harder and you might stare a hole in the guy," Davis said, coming up beside her. Davis was one of the other trainers, and she liked him. He seemed approachable and down to earth, and the wedding band on his hand assured her he wouldn't be flirting with her, unlike some of the other men who had approached her over the last few days. She folded her arms across her chest. "I'm worried about Mason. He came in Monday with a slight limp, and while he swore to give it some rest, it sure doesn't look like he's resting it to me." "Did you examine him?" "As much as I could." She shrugged and blew out an exasperated breath. "I think it's Achilles tendonitis, but he refuses to get an MRI to verify." Davis let out a low whistle. "Well, I can see why. If that's what it is, it would take him out of the game this weekend, and maybe the rest of the playoff games if they win." "I know, but wouldn't that be better than it rupturing?" She bit her lip, unsure of what to do. On one hand, she wasn't 100% sure, and she didn't want to jeopardize his playing time if she was wrong. She also didn't want to be responsible for a worse injury if she was right. "You can't make him listen to you, though. Massage it after every practice, make sure he's icing it, and resting it at home, and tell Justin if you're really worried. That's about all you can do." Clara nodded. That was sound advice, and she had been following the first steps since she found out about it. Perhaps she could offer to make him dinner tonight to make sure he was resting it properly at home. "How is the ankle feeling?" she asked as Mason climbed up on her table that afternoon after practice. "Are you asking as my trainer or my friend?" he asked with a hesitant smile. "Both. I wouldn't be doing my professional duty if I didn't check up on you. But as your friend, I'm worried you're pushing it." She unlaced his shoe and pulled it off, watching his face for any indication of pain. "I really think it's getting better. Felt no pain today." Clara pulled his sock down and carefully unwound the tape. "It's still swollen though, Mason. I'm not sure you're giving it enough rest." "Well, I try to put it up at night when I get home, but I do still have things to do after practice. You know, eating, cleaning, etc." He flashed her a charming smile, as if that made it all better. "Yes, and speaking of which, how about I make you dinner tonight? That way you can totally put your foot up and ice it, and I'll feel a little better about how much you've been running on it." She threw the question out there, but kept her eyes on his ankle as her fingers massaged the tissue around the tendon. "You want to make me dinner? To rest my foot?" She could hear the disbelief and the note of teasing in his voice. "I do. Plus it would give us some time to catch up. We haven't really gotten to talk much." She really did want to know how the last few years had been for him, whether he was dating anyone, if he still cared about her. "Are you sure that's allowed? I think Justin might have his sights set on you." "Ew." She scrunched her nose and stopped massaging his ankle to look at him. "He's got to be close to 40, right?" Realizing she had spoken the words aloud, she quickly scanned the room to make sure Justin wasn't around. She liked him, as a boss, but there was nothing beyond that. Not for her, at least. Mason chuckled and flashed her a wink. "Yeah, I think he might be just over 40 and recently divorced. Hot commodity on the market. You might want to snatch him up before someone else does." Clara swatted his leg. "No, thank you. I don't date my bosses anyway. That never works out well." Mason's brow lifted in curiosity. "Tried that once, did you?" She flashed a small smile in return, but she didn't tell him about the guy her father had most recently pushed on her. He hadn't really been her boss, at least not her direct boss. No, he'd been bigger than that. The assistant head of the athletics department at the University of Texas. And she still hadn't broken up with him directly. She figured he had gotten the hint when she stopped returning his calls and moved. But she still felt a little badly for the way she had ghosted him. However, Mason did not need to know about that. So she deflected his comment and changed the subject. Anyway, dinner? Though she didn't look at him, she could feel his gaze raking over her, trying to figure out what she wasn't saying. He'd always been good at reading her, but she hoped he wasn't doing so now. Okay, dinner sounds good. Good. She finished massaging his ankle and handed him some ibuprofen and her business card. Take these, get cleaned up, and then ice that ankle. Text me your address and I'll be there around 7. Mason popped the ibuprofen and pocketed her card. Sounds good. I'll see you then. He put his sock and shoe back on, flashed her a little wave, and sauntered out of her office. Clara collapsed into her chair and dropped her head in her hands. She hoped she hadn't just made a huge mistake.